catch up with Adam Tarry. Now, he is one part of the Sam Brace project, which I've loved playing on the show recently. Adam's based in Guernsey, and we're going to be hearing from him on the programme tonight, alongside a couple of tracks from them. I've got a tune called Panic on the way, as well as Ultraviolet, a song I've been showcasing and really loving and bumping on the show quite a lot recently. But let's hear from Adam, and I wanted to find out where his and Sam's relationship first started.
Sam and I first met at probably the ripe old age of 7, I would say, in a small town in Sussex called Hastings. We went to the same primary school. And Sam is probably the reason I ever did anything in regards to making music, because his mum was very musical and gently nudged him, I guess, in that direction. I think his mum was a concert pianist, actually.
Oh, wow.
I used to go to his house every morning before secondary school, and musical instruments were just accessible. You know, he had a very cheap Slash Epiphone guitar and a Marshall amp, and then one day almost organically grew a very cheap blue drum kit.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much experience you've got in bands, but I think being a drummer in a band is a lot like being a goalkeeper in a football match.
Yeah.
It's a very essential part, but no one wants to do it.
Yeah.
So having played with a few different things, it became quite obvious that if I wanted to have any part in our musical adventures, I would probably need to pick up a set of drumsticks.
I see.
And do something along those lines. So I did, purely because the drum kit was there in his house, basically. And then about 10 years passed, and Sam and I were in our very first bands together. Awful bands.
What was it called?
So there's a Guy Ritchie movie called The Snatch, which actually we came before that, but we called ourselves The Snatch. So that was our first band. Then he went up to London, I stayed down south. I carried on being in bands to about the age of 25 when I put the drumsticks down, and then probably didn't do anything musical until 3.5 years ago when my boy said, I want to learn the guitar.
Right.
So I thought, great, I'll get a guitar. And began to learn the songs that I liked. And then about a year after that, lockdown happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but it felt like a really weird... I mean, obviously it felt weird.
Yeah.
But it felt like, I guess, a contraction where suddenly a lot of people you hadn't seen for a very long time were going through exactly the same thing.
Well, a lot of people reconnected, I suppose, over
That's
that time.
it. And I think that sense of shared experience encouraged a lot of people to get back in touch, and the internet played a massive part in that, because it's such an easy way of getting in touch with people.
Yeah.
So I began recording little 10, 15-second snippets of the songs that I really liked from when I was younger. And
were they originals or covers?
They were covers,
Yeah.
and I was blanket bombing most of my old friends, going, hey, do you remember this song? More than anything, just to show off that I'd learnt bar chords than
nice.
anything else.
Always the hardest thing.
Absolutely, yeah, especially when you're used to being a drummer, eh?
Yeah.
One of the people I blanket bombed was Sam, and I sent him a cover of a song called She Said by a band called Long Pigs, a Sheffield band from the 90s. I think hugely underrated, but very much of that kind of Radiohead, Supergrass era. And he said, wow, that's great, I haven't heard that for ages, man. Do you have any ideas for original songs? And I was a year into playing the guitar at that point, but arrogantly had to come up with a few ideas for original songs. And I think Sam was sort of looking for a catalyst, and obviously the lockdown had affected him very differently. He'd been on the road with Skinny Lister for nearly a decade, like massively hard-working band, and obviously doing really well for themselves.
Sure.
You know, supporting people like Flogging Molly, supporting Frank Turner.
Yeah.
And he was just, in the first time for about a decade, able to just sort of stop and think about his musical direction as well. So I said, yeah, here's a track. Much like, I guess, the people in the American Deep South build crazy sculptures out of cars on their front lawn. Didn't really know what chords it used or anything like that, but sent it over anyway, along with a few words that I was sort of spitballing. And he went, yeah, I think it's great, let's work it up. And that became a track called Panic, which is on the album. And in itself is probably very much of that lockdown era.
Well, even just the title, this is what everyone was doing, wasn't it?
I have to admit, to my shame, it was probably written sitting in a car somewhere in February of that year going, what is everyone worrying about?
Yeah.
Like, this is just another
we were all there. I feel like we were all there. No one could have predicted what happened. So it was kind of the antithesis of Panic.
I know. Well, yeah, and just that kind of, here's the media again, you know, getting us all worked up. And actually, as it transpired, they were completely right.
It was a big deal. Oh, yeah, I suppose.
so I pinged that over to him. He said, yeah, great, let's work it up. We played about with it for a little bit. We roped in a guy I used to play bass with as well, who came and put some bass on it. And it turned out really nice. Like, it turned out pretty well, and we said, hey, let's do another one. And on we went. And then I guess we got to a point where we had 3 or 4 tracks, and Sam was like, do you know what? I'd like to try and work together on doing some stuff with this. And
a bit more seriously.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was bringing, as I say, these very strange front garden trash sculpture things out, and he was then applying a decade of musicianship and skill and arrangement and going, hey, you really need something called a middle 8 here. And I'm like, what's that?
I don't know.
So he would put that together, and he would just turn this absolute sort of panel beat and stuff into songs, and then as it went on, he would bring ideas to the table as well, and we began to work together more and more.
If we can all agree that Panic is an animal with tiny insidious claws, but surely modern life has given us something, a key, a back door. Though some voices are so loud they can be heard underwater, and nothing runs like a crowd. Endless horizon. It's clear that modern life has taught us nothing. There are things to fear. Take this gaffer tape bandolier and these 3-liter bottles, and you can just disappear here.
Introducing Tim Hunter.
Sam Brace with Panic there, and before that we were hearing from Adam Tarry, who is one half of the Sam Brace project, and that was actually one of the tunes that Adam was talking about, Panic, that was kind of written during lockdown. It was great to catch up with him. Adam's based in Guernsey and Sam is based, I believe, somewhere in Greece at the moment, which obviously provides some, well, I suppose, confusion and difficulty when it comes to working together, seeming as there is bodies of water closer between the two of them. So I wanted to find out a bit about how Sam and Adam work together.
I'm some random guy from the Channel Islands. I haven't really touched an instrument in 20 years.
Yeah.
We should probably think about the way to do this, and obviously there are a bunch of duos out there, people like Sleaford Mods, people like Sparks, who work in different ways. But we thought, well, if we want this to go as far as it can, and we probably did, and the best thing to do is leverage the fact that Sam exists.
Yeah.
Sam is known. Sam has spent all this time in the industry. I don't have a massive ego, so I was perfectly happy to be sort of part of that. But as I suppose my musicianship has got to the point where it's 5% of Sam's, and I've become, more confident in myself, and because he's a cool guy, and at the end of the day, we want to hang out and do stuff together, I've begun to pop up in videos and the social media and become a bit more sort of central to it.
Do you enjoy that side of things?
The being in the spotlight stuff, I think everybody does to a degree. It's very difficult, isn't it? And I think that question nowadays with social media is almost a very different question to what was acceptable 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You do always wonder about when that line towards being pretentious is crossed, but then to the same degree, we really have a lot of faith in these songs, and music exists, I guess, as an art form to decorate time, and if nobody's hearing it, then it's not reaching its full potential.
Definitely. And I think it's very much in a personal thing. Even, when I put stuff out on social media, you're thinking, oh, what are people going to think about this? And you can get into your head quite a lot, but actually it's good to hear that, you're right in that respect that people need to hear it. So it's kind of part of the wheel of music in the industry nowadays, isn't it?
It's essential, I think. We need to... I was outside taking a shot in front of the sign because it's going to go straight on social media, because just having a message, having something useful to say to people is really interesting. But you're right, it's replaced what would be a more traditional A&R process back in the day. I mean, we had guys from in bands that I used to be involved with back in my 20s. Somebody from EMI would rock up at a gig and there'd be a hush, and it just doesn't work like that anymore. If you look at artists like Billie Eilish and
she just came up through SoundCloud and the sharing of it.
Just through that completely organic process. So we're really, really open to that. And I suppose as an older guy, I've had to put some of those concerns about, what will people think, to one side to a degree, and just sort of crack on with it, I think. And getting it out there, getting it heard, it's really, really important. And that's I think one of the most important tools that exist.
And I think it's so nice and in a way brilliant that your friendship with Sam is what started it all off, and it's sort of, you took that break and now you're back and you're working together. Where do you sort of see it going? And because I'm always interested in people that are friends beforehand and then make sort of bands or groups like what you and Sam have done, and that relationship as well with sort of the distance, like geographically with you. How do you sort of see that working going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's more of the same, really. I mean, another of the interesting things I found out about music production and promotion is you're a year ahead of what you're talking about most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, the album was done last year, but it's taken this long to get it mixed, mastered, to line up PR and promotion and all that sort of stuff. So we're 4 or 5 tracks into the next one, I suppose, already.
I always find that when I speak to musicians, they're like, I really want to play you this song because this is the thing that I'm really excited about at the moment. Obviously, the album's wicked as well, but, I'm working on this brand new stuff, but actually, we've got to talk about this stuff because you're only hearing it and seeing it for the first time.
Yeah, I think the next steps are probably just to try and... I feel like Fever and Bones, which is obviously the album that's out, is us tugging on a lot of different musical threads. I mean, it's all got certain things that bring it together, and I mean, there are all sorts of different references people give when they hear the album, but they are all sort of an ilk. And I think both of us have probably now, through experimenting with all those different songs, and probably the 10 or so that we would have thrown in the bin and never made it onto the album, have probably reached a point where we're more confident about the direction that we want to go in. And I like second albums. Like, I think, if you look at it,
because people can be quite fearful of second albums.
I think most of the best music that I've heard tends to be second albums. I like to think of it as the Ridley Scott Aliens effect. Alien was a great movie, but Aliens was an incredible movie. And I do like that. But I think there's that risk, isn't there, that if you're in a touring band, which obviously we're not, all you've got to write about is the inside of hotel rooms in that second album, and that's not something that a lot of people can associate with.
Yeah. Where do you draw your inspiration from?
I guess that's a really interesting one, really. I've got a super eclectic reference for music, which probably goes, I mean, I think the band I come back to over and over again, and the band that when I was beginning to learn guitar, I was like, right, how can I learn their entire back catalogue?
Yeah.
Was Pearl Jam.
Okay.
And certainly sort of, classic era Pearl Jam.
Some band to choose.
Yeah, I mean, you just come back to them over and over again. But I mean, I like K Tempest. I love spoken word. I like some very obscure. There's a guy called Disraeli and the Small Gods out of Bristol, who's like I would guess folk hip hop band.
Wow.
And also, again, classic era Alanis Morissette, Tori Amos, all that sort of stuff is right up my street. And I think the thread running through all of it is probably that weight of emotion to a degree, and I guess the lyrics as well are always super important to me. Whereas Sam would probably give you quite a different mix of people, which I think is a really strong place to build a partnership from to a degree, because he's always saying make it more melodic, and I'm always banging on the door to turn it up to 11.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle, he's moderating my Rage Against the Machine, Idols kind of roots, and I'm trying to say, David Bowie's already happened and all that sort of stuff, and where we kind of come together is this really cool place.